Let's talk about how to avoid triggering eye rolls with your copy. And we're going to do that by talking about a famous concept called market sophistication, which is usually quite boring, but I'm going to try and make it fun and simple for you. And I'm going to do that first by showing you this. This is my homepage, or at least it was at the time I made this course. It may have changed by now. In fact, I think it is already a little bit different as I look at it now, but fine. What do you notice about how I'm breaking typical marketing rules? And just in case you can't read that headline, it says, "G'day, I'm the best marketer in Australia," right? That's the first line there. And then the subcopy is talking about me as well. Do you notice anything that's wrong about that? Well, I'll say it's this. It's all talking about me. Me. I'm the best marketer. I've been called. I'm a copywriter, blah, blah. It's all about me. But aren't we told that copy is supposed to talk about your reader first and first promise them what you can give them? I did not do that. Why not? Well, to understand that, you need to understand a little concept called market sophistication. It was first introduced in the famous copywriting book, Breakthrough Advertising by Gene Schwartz. And you can sum this concept up as, how many similar claims has the market already been exposed to? Because you have to speak differently to someone who's never heard a claim before than to someone who's heard it 1,000 times. And Eugene Schwartz broke it into 5 levels of sophistication, from no sophistication to total sophistication or saturation. All right. And now some people use 3 levels, some use 5. It's not so important. The idea is just to understand that there is a bit of a scale. And to show you what I mean, let's give you an example of what these levels would look like in the fat loss market, something that everyone knows. So you might start off in this level of low sophistication, which Eugene Schwartz called stage 1. And that is when you can just make the claim. Just come out and make the claim. Lose fat. Now, I would venture that it's been a very long time since advertising was that unsophisticated in the lose fat market, right? I don't think you can go around today just saying, "Hey, I'll show you how to lose fat." They'll be like, "Yeah, right. I've heard that a million times." Okay? But at some point back in the past when the first person came up with a diet pill or whatever it is, that might have been a headline you could use. But then eventually a lot of people start making that claim. So you have to go to stage 2, which is when you are making more intensified claims. So instead of saying lose fat, well, one guy's saying that, then the guy next to him is saying, "I'll show you how to torch 15 pounds of fat fast." That's a more intensified claim. Eventually, though, that runs out of steam. And then the market moves to what we call stage 3. And that is when we have to start using mechanisms to differentiate why our claim works. To give people a reason to believe when they're sick of hearing claims. So now we have a new 1-minute routine for losing fat. Oh, this is the first time I've heard of a routine. So even if I've heard all these other claims and I don't believe them anymore because everyone's saying it, well, this is the first person promising me this 1-minute routine that does it, for example. Or maybe it's a new pill that does it, or a device that does it, or a workout that does it. You need to add a mechanism. Then eventually, everyone starts using that mechanism, right? So you have to now use an intensified mechanism. Maybe it's the first 1-minute routine that torches fat without dieting, doing 0 exercise, and while stuffing your face with all the foods you want. Well, that's really cool. And eventually, that also saturates the market. And eventually you arrive at this stage where Eugene Schwartz called the market totally saturated. He called that stage 5. And what you have to do then is identify with your product. So the headlines cease to be about benefits. And instead, it's something like this. "I looked at myself naked in the mirror and just cried." Now, I made that one up, but it's based on actual research that I have done when I worked with a client who was selling to people in that market of older women who felt that their bodies had, they put on a lot of weight and they were ashamed of it. And they would talk about that. So that is something that would identify with them. Note that there is 0 benefit in that headline. It does not promise them a thing. It just identifies with them. And when you get to a saturated market, that is how you have to start drawing people into your ad. Or that's what Gene Schwartz argued. Anyway, so let's generalize that a little bit so it's not just a loose fat market. Your first stage is when the claim's never been made before. You just make the claim. Then the market gets saturated by the claim. You make a stronger claim. Then the market's saturated by strong claims, so you add a new mechanism to the claim. The market gets saturated by the new mechanism, so you strengthen the mechanism. And then the final stage, the market is totally saturated. Stop making claims, you pivot to identifying with the reader. Now you might be asking, why wouldn't you always use a level 4 or 5 headline? Why not always come out with this crazy intensive mechanism or just identify with your reader? Well, to illustrate that, let me give you an example. I'm going to make up a new product, how to train your cat to speak English. There, I wrote this info product and I paid a very reputable designer to design the cover, as you can tell. The designer was called Daniel Throssell and he was very cheap on Upwork. Now, imagine I'm trying to sell this book. Which headline do you think would make a better headline for an ad? This one. I was so heartbroken watching my sick cat and not knowing what was wrong. Or this one. Train your cat to speak English. Well, that's way better, right? If you're a cat owner and you saw an ad, train your cat to speak English, you'd be like, tell me how and take my money. And this is a pure naked stage 1 headline. Whereas the other one, I was so heartbroken watching my sick cat and not knowing what was wrong. Well, that is a stage 5 headline. That's trying to identify with the reader. But clearly, a stage 1 headline is superior because no one in the history of the world has ever come out with a product on how to train a cat to speak English. And so if you are the first one to do that, it's going to be way stronger to just come out and say it. But in a more saturated market, you need to use a mechanism to make people believe you. And that's why my website uses me as the mechanism. Or the mechanism, if you prefer. Ha 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 ha. Because copywriting is quite a saturated market. If my headline on my website just said, make more money with your emails, you'd be like, oh yeah, right, bro. Every other copywriter makes that claim, which is like every 1990s sales letter, right? How you can put floods of cash into your bank account and travel the world in luxury. All this nonsense. No one believes it anymore because the market's saturated. And so similarly, when you're doing research, you want to know your market sophistication level so you're not making claims that cause that reaction in them. So how do you define a market sophistication level? Well, there are a few questions you can use for that. How many similar claims, products, or services have they been exposed to already? How many competing products do they know of, and how many have they tried? You'll know if they talk about this. They might mention it in forums. Oh yeah, I tried so-and-so drug for my arthritis and it didn't work. Or in surveys, sometimes I will ask, have you bought any other products to solve this? And they'll tell me, or they'll say, well, I know of this one, but I didn't buy it. Are the competition advertising to them the same way as I'm going to? I mean, if I'm writing a Facebook ad, is this going to be one of many similar Facebook ads my prospect will be seeing? And probably the answer is yes. But your client is generally going to be a really good source on this because they are immersed in this. They should know who their competition are and what they're doing. And finally, what kind of claims are the competition making in their advertising? And later in this course, I will show you some ways to see what your competition are doing for some markets. But if you can find your competition's advertising and you know that people are seeing this, well, see what kind of claims are they making? And that should give you a good idea where your market's at. And again, you're not necessarily going to come right out and ask all these questions. I'm just showing you what you should know. And you're going to find this out as you go through the stages of research later. Now, one piece of advice, don't try too hard to fit all this into a number like, well, my analysis shows that this is a stage 2 market and therefore I should use this headline. Don't be that analytical about it. Some people use 5 stages of awareness, some use 3. The point is, it's just a graded system. So you don't need to worry too hard about what the actual number is. I never have. Instead, I recommend you just use this simple test. Your copy should pass the eye roll test. And what I mean by that is, you don't want to trigger the reaction of, oh yeah, haven't heard that before. And common sense is usually going to tell you when that is, right? Like I said before, if my headline on my website promised you something about make bucket loads of cash from your emails, you would be like, puke. Instead, by using myself as a mechanism, I can appeal to people who might otherwise be put off. And by the way, an important distinction here, I mean that the claim shouldn't make them roll their eyes, not the structure. So a cringy video sales letter opening like, my name is Michael Smith and the story you're about to read is 100% true. That kind of thing is going to make you roll your eyes in a different way because it is just a video sales letter with cringy copy. I'm not talking about that. That's not the eye roll test. The eye roll test is the claim that you're making about your product. So make $1 million working from home in your pajamas. Well, that is kind of a claim that may get people rolling their eyes. Then again, in some markets, like all these courses that are selling how to become an Amazon dropshipper, and they target young people who are just kind of for the first time learning about this, well, they're not very sophisticated. So maybe claims like that work on them. That's the point. This is going to vary by market. Just make sure your claim is not something they've already heard a million times. And to do that, in your research, which I'll be showing you how to do, keep an eye out for signs of how much advertising the market has seen and how to make sure that you're meeting them where they are. All right, so that wraps up market sophistication, and you can see where we're at in our system so far. Next, we're going to dive into a kind of related concept called market awareness.